I would say I certainly strive to do that. I always think about how my actions are going to impact that of others.
Yep.
Above my own accomplishments or whatever it may be, but everything I do, whether I know it or not, is going to have an impact somewhere else.
Absolutely.
So if I can get that mentality out to other individuals, that everything they do, they may not know it, but it's going to impact somebody else somewhere down the line.
Gotcha. Beautiful. Thank you. Next.
I wrote down a balanced approach. And that could be kind of across a couple different areas, right? But I think there's oftentimes struggles or opportunities, but it's often held in balance with other things, right? Kind of like all truth is held in balance with other things. So what does that mean? That when there is a struggle point, if we have more of a well-rounded understanding of the situation, the factors, what you were saying about like the effects of what we implement and how that will change things moving forward.
Yeah.
I think sometimes I'm not necessarily stuck playing catch up, but maybe one of the few in the room saying, well, we actually should probably approach it from a different angle because of the well-roundedness of different experiences that we've all been in. And kind of advocating for a group or advocating for another customer, whether it's someone on our staff that, hey, there's an opportunity here for growth, they have an interest here. Maybe if we take a well-rounded approach at what their daily tasks are to move them forward, or if it's a struggle of implementing a service and say, you know, if we implement this, who are the teams that are going to be affected and who all needs to be aware of that?
That, you know, that, and there's, by the way, did you hear communication in there? What's interesting to me is you talked about balance. So this is the picture I got, right? But then when you described it, I got that flow from big picture to micro impact, big picture to micro impact. So I saw balance in your conversation in two different dimensions. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the large impact to the small impact is probably the feeling that I get more than the common teeter-totter, right? So it's
right.
Not necessarily if we do this, we have to counterbalance it with something else, but if we're going to do something, we have to look at all the levels of the organization,
Yeah,
or individual or whatever that is, and balance it throughout.
and there's another picture you just gave me, and then we'll move on. And that is, so when I started my grandkids skiing, I had this little balance board, and it was, you know, one way or the other. And it was really good for them to get the idea of pushing on the inside of their foot and kind of trying to go from one foot to the other. There are other balance boards that the bottom is circular. It's a lot harder. So thank you. Who's next? Thanks.
I also wrote balance, but I wrote a work-life balance with family and trying to do both of those and do your best in both and not trying not to cross the lines, because I often find myself answering emails while I'm helping my son with his homework and trying not to do that.
Yeah.
So that's my struggle.
And you know, when you said that, I'm going to tell you, I saw at least 3 visible heads going like this. So that's a good one to get out there. I think do we have one more?
I think 2 less. Have you gone yet?
Two more, yes.
No, you can. Okay. I'm glad you asked this question, because like this week has been really a struggle in the program that I run. So we have like a limited number of volunteers to run the program with. And I just had like 3 matches in this week and 2 volunteers who are considering leaving the program entirely. I don't know what's in the air this week. But it's really pressing now for me to figure out a way to find more people who are willing to volunteer for the mentoring program.
Wow. And if you had a magic wand, what would it be like for you?
I I would have a shorter waiting list. I would have more matches and a greater impact on the lives of the families that we service and work with. A lot of right now we have a waiting list of about 20 kids. And some of those kids have been on the waiting list for like 4+ years.
Oh,
So
dear.
it's been a challenge to attract volunteers, but I think since COVID, it's gotten a lot harder. And now, like, a lot of our volunteers are towards like the end of their golden retirement years, and they're ready to move away, they're ready to do something different. Or they were like in that empty nest stage, and now they're getting ready for retirement and they're gonna travel, so they're no longer willing or able to make the commitment to the program, so.
Got it. Wow. All right. And you're gonna hear that again today, by the way. And one more.
Yeah, so I have a hard time with this question personally, just like I have some attachments that don't feel good, and it doesn't yeah, so I reframed the question a little bit for myself, is what would I like to work on within myself? And that would be to be a better delegator. And there's a couple pieces of that. One that comes up for me a lot is feeling limited by my level of authority. So
Yep.
I guess maybe before that, it's important to say, so my struggle with delegating tasks is that I have a certain idea or standard that I think should be met, or that, you know, the task is outlined, right? And
Oh.
feeling like I have to settle for mediocrity if I'm to delegate it. And it's not for me about being a perfectionist necessarily, or about thinking that I can do it better than anyone else. It's just given the team or the situation that I have at that time, that's what giving that up would mean. And so that's where that feeling of being limited by level of authority, because it's like, if you put the team together and, you know, you are responsible for each of those people and each of their level of proficiency, then that's what you've built and created. And so you kind of have to be okay with what they're doing. So yeah, that's what I've got.
That is this, the struggle is real. And it's about, you know, if you look at the people you work with as part of the toolkit you have, and what you need in that person is a hammer and it's a screwdriver, then that's kind of hard.
Yeah.
You know? And but the other issue I heard you say is standards, which I think is a really interesting piece. I'm hearing you differentiate. It's not a personal thing for me about what someone does. It's that this is the result that you need to be able to get if we're going to be the kind of organization I will be proud to be part of. And that is the target. And this individual or these individuals don't abide by that, or don't get there, or don't maybe even understand it. But when you are standards based, sometimes people think they play it off to personality, but it's a real challenge when you don't have the authority to influence it the way you'd like. So
yeah, and I really had to check myself, like a lot of these instances, I'm like, okay, is this my personal aesthetic that it's not being met, or is this the brand or the image, or, you know, the
foundational standard? Yes.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
You know, I'm glad you say you've checked yourself on that, because that's an important thing to be able to do. And I have a sense that all of you are pretty good at that. So the next step that we're going to do, and it's very interesting to me that most of you really kind of focused on yourselves with this magic wand, but the magic wand is a really good trick for you to use on yourself sometimes when you're really trying to say, what is my vision? What would exactly good look like here? Because sometimes what happens is you have within you this amorphous blob of tension for what isn't, and you have never really been able to say to yourself, okay, let's really break that down. If that was exactly what I wanted it to look like, what would it look like? And why? And And being able to do that is a really essential piece of visioning, creating a vision. And we are going to ask you very soon to create a vision for something. And so the reason we did the magic wand is it's kind of a tool to, you kind of look around and say, if I had a magic wand, I would have my 3 grandchildren that live in New Jersey, probably live in Delhi. Then I'd have all 6 in Delhi and it would be so much better because after several weeks of not seeing my 2 granddaughters, I saw them this weekend, and the energy that gives me is just beyond. So that, magic wand, having a vision, and why that means so much to you. So now what have I done? Of course, I know I need to see them more. So I've scheduled a visit to New Jersey because I have to find a way to get to my vision differently because they're busy. So we're going to ask you to do some visioning and some kind of magic wand work. So just kind of keep that in the back of your head. And you do great work at all times. I'm just really excited with what I hear from you. Our next job is Ray.
Hey, Diane,
Yeah,
I don't want to leave. Can we stay on that topic for just a couple
of
minutes?
of course.
Because to some degree or another, everyone here is working within a team, either in a direct team or in a supervisory, small s, role. And as right before class started today, I got an email from the monthly email saying that the unemployment numbers are available for last month here in the county, and Delaware County in the month of September had a 3.1% unemployment rate. Astounding. So, Nalia, the folks that you have coming in to work, and they're temporary workers, because you're still in harvest, right?
Mhm.
Are going to be different than the folks, Tanya, that you're working with, or Jordan, the volunteers that you're trying to match. And how do you all, and Beth, last month you talked about having to fill in and just, with COVID and moving through the nursing home, how that impacts your staff. How do you set those standards when, and I think it's particularly difficult for you because these are folks who you won't be employed in another, who you will not be employing these folks in another 3 or 4 weeks.
I think actually specifically the folks I was thinking of when I thought about this are not so much the folks that are there on a seasonal basis. It's more folks that are there more long-term.
Okay.
The seasonal times I'm able to kind of say like, okay, they're here temporarily. Is it worth the time and energy? You know what I'm saying? Like it's, there's less expectation, I think, when it's seasonal, and there's a certain, like, I know this is temporary, they know this is temporary, so it's just, I don't know, different dynamic.
Do any of your companies spend time during the onboarding process of a new hire to discuss things like mission,
Yeah.
philosophy, standards, expectations? You're nodding heads.
Mhm.
I can say, so I'm not required to, but I do attend almost all of the interviews that my community office managers hold. And during our first 5-10 minutes, when we're doing our individual descriptions, at that time is where I talk about the company and what our mission statement is and how we live by that mission statement and what our expectations are for each employee. Now, it's hard and difficult.
Now, excuse me,
to-
that's at the time of interview, not of hire. So you're really setting those
Mhm.
expectations very early in the
Yes.
process.
Yes.
And someone can say,
Mhm.
Right. But then you also, what I was going to say is you can also get the counter of that, where obviously everybody is on their best behavior and prepared for the interview, you know, so.
oh, you'd be surprised.
So oftentimes,
Tales from the interview room.
Yeah.
yeah. So oftentimes,
That sounds good.
if we do, you know, offer the position to that individual and months go on, now they're not under my direct supervision all the
Right,
time. They're
right.
under the community office managers. And I have a good team, not a great team. I have a good team. I have a lot of seasoned managers, but not everybody within the community office leads by example, which is what I'm trying to create. I'm trying to get, no matter if you're a teller, a CSR, a manager, everybody's role is equivalent. Everybody is, you know, the most important and valuable employee we have. That's how I view it. You know, my job is no more important than that as a part-time teller. But how do we get those standards followed and maintained by everyone within the bank at all times? That's been a challenge.
So that's just so interesting to me, because here's what I'm hearing. I'm hearing, what are the standards? Are they clearly stated? How are they utilized in ongoing supervision? How are they modeled? And is it different for seasonal versus long-term?
Mhm.
Mm.
So this is an incredibly complex piece of leadership. Obviously, if they're seasonal, you know, you're going to do some very quick, direct teaching. You're going to watch them. You're going to have maybe a couple who you know are good, keep an eye out. You're going to monitor every now and again, and you're going to just keep pushing. Whereas the long-term circumstances are going to be far more reliant on what's in writing and what's modeled.
Mm.
Because remember, when you say something and you do something, people are 70 to 80% of the time, and I do that just because I don't like anybody quoting a pinpoint statistic in this kind of realm, but 70 to 80% of the time, people are going to believe what they see you do and not what you say.
Yeah.
You know, so setting standards for the long term requires both the structural side, right? You've got to have it in writing. You've got to have it in your mission statement. You use it as part of your onboarding. But then it's got to be baked into your ongoing supervision, and it has to be modeled.
Mhm.
All right. And that's a huge, Ray, how'd I do? Is that?
Yeah, no, I just wanted to explore that topic a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's not an easy one. And how you go about doing that ties very directly. And now it's Ray's turn to take over.
First, a comment from Jake.
I just had a real quick thing, so.
Yeah.
You know, you had mentioned groups and stuff like that, that we work within, and we have groups and we have committees and we have departments in our structure, and some of it is very formal, some of it's not so formal, but we had mentioned last week how like results kind of put some of that proof into the leadership structure and into kind of that, and having those results as kind of a backer for additional buy-in. And we're talking about standard and stuff like that. Sometimes it seems like no matter what the result is, there's still outlying influences either further up the chain or further down the chain that restrict that growth of that as well. So it's like, hey, we have XYZ team that's operating very well. and they're doing their thing, but this group is not and this group is not. So there's kind of that, and I don't want to say it's crisis management, but it's also like an organizational like conundrum of how do we have one group working well and continue to grow that when we need these people to come along with.
It's a little bit of a battle between commitment and accountability with a
Right.
commitment and accountability, which by the way, we'll be talking about in a little while.
Or the
Because that's a,
standard is being grown or it's being pressed out there. We have teams that are jumping to it very quickly, and we have others that are a little bit more slower on the uptake.
interesting. I'm writing that down.
Yeah.
And, you know, one of the things that I think we'll touch on, not today, but at some point in the future is how you work with volunteers.
Yeah.
Because that's a huge, you know, that's a huge challenge for you. And, you know, sometimes you may need to fire a volunteer. You've been there. And that's, you know, that's not easy. All right, we're gonna talk about personality styles. How was that experience?
I love that.
You say eye-opening and confirming at the same time.
Probably. We'll get into that, but anybody, you know, super surprised? No, huh?
I mean, I don't know if there was something that I was missing, but I didn't feel like I got the final response back. Like of what that means.
That's what we're gonna talk about.
Okay,
So you have 4 letters right now that you have no idea what that really means.
I actually had a question. I did have a tie on one of them, and it's one of the important ones.
They're all important.
Yeah, totally. Except for doesn't the first one like not go into the?
Well, you know, then when you have a tie,
Mhm,
write down both sets.
mhm.
Yeah.
And see, we're gonna talk a little bit about what these things. I don't want to say what these things mean, because it's what these things may show you,
Uh-huh.
what these things may show you. And Beth, Caitlin, I sent you both some of the handouts that we're using. This one is the one that's called 4 Dimensions of Personal Style. Two, three, 4, 5. This is. Don't pay attention to this stuff. Let's just talk about what these are. You've heard probably somewhere. You've heard people talk about Myers-Briggs, and that's what this sort of is. It's just about its personality styles, and it's not that one is better than another. Of course, your own is always better, but it's not that one is better than another. It's just knowing what your style might be and how then you interrelate with others. Just a little bit of background based on the work of Carl Jung, analytical psychology, and it was the foundation of this Myers-Briggs type indicator. And we're using a very simple version of this. And as I said, it's not about being normal or abnormal. It's just what is wrong here? Ah, shucks. Okay, well, plan B. I'll get you the full presentation. I don't know why that's acting that way. So let me talk you through what these are. So first, now again, keep these those letters that you worked on in your mind. First, we talk about the four dimensions, if you will, of personality. And we're going to talk about the two ends of the scale and see where you are located on that scale. First is that the first dimension is about energy. It's what charges us up. It charges our inner battery, if you will, and also what wears us out. So that first dimension block that you worked on was I and E, introversion and extroversion. Those who are introverts, those who are extroverts. Where did you all fall in that scale?
I was an introversion.
Beth, that was you?
I was as well as an introvert. What's happening on the screen?
How about you all?
Mine was introvert.
Same.
You too?
Extrovert,
Where on the scale?
30-10.
Wow.
Yeah, I expect it.
I do feel though is that when I was going through and scoring, in my mind, I was scoring based upon how I would apply this at work.
That's
And
fine.
I think if I applied it outside of work, it would be different.
Well, try it.
Okay.
And see what you come up with. That's an interesting idea. You know, those folks who score on the introversion side of the scale generally recharge their batteries just with some quiet time by themselves. And they may find that people wears them out to be around a lot of people. Does that hold true for the most part? Whereas those who fall on the extroversion side of the scale generally get energized by being around other people. And they experience fatigue when they're alone for too long, or when you get to my age, that means that you take a quiet nap. People who score on the introversion side of the scale generally prefer gathering their thoughts before speaking. If you're on the extroversion side, they are comfortable thinking out loud. You're nodding your head. That resonates.
Yeah. And I think another point is that depending upon where you are on that scale, it could be painful for you to have to speak in front of other people. So I've worked with some incredibly bright people, are very, very high I, and it was real work for them to be able to they could organize their thoughts. They were brilliant, but to share it with a group was really tough. Do you know any people like that? Have you ever worked with any people like that? And then there's the think out loud side. If you get real extreme, you know, sometimes they just can't stop emoting.
So continuing to look at the energy side, if you put those folks in a party, those who score high on the I would prefer to find a quiet place for a one-on-one conversation. The folks on the E side might be the last person to leave the party. They might be energized. They need to wind down before they go home. Does anyone fall right around the middle?
I did. It was like 3 points over on the introversion side for me.
Yeah, Caitlin, I'm falling in that same category. And again, finishing up this idea of energy, those on the I side, it's gonna be, that personal space is gonna be more important to the folks on the introversion side. Those on the extroversion are gonna be more comfortable sharing an office, a hotel room, workspace, something like that with others. The next dimension is how we gather information about the world around us. So on the one side, the N stands for intuition. The S stands for sensing. So, and Jung said that this dimension creates the biggest gulf between people, because they take in information so very differently. So when you have someone who may be on the N side, and again, just give me an idea. Who's high on the intuition side, on the N side? You are. And everyone else is high on the sensing side?
Ray, did you give a definition of those, intuition and sensing? That's not as clear to me.
The folks who score high on the intuition side generally look for the big picture, and they're going to look for those possibilities and inferences that are suggested by what they perceive. Those who are high on the sensing side focus on immediate concrete realities. It's what they can see, touch, taste, hear, and smell. Kind of for me anyway, kind of counterintuitive to what you think would be at first.
Yeah, that's why I wanted you to define it, because so I call it a gut versus tangible.
Yep, that's a good way.
Because when I've always thought that those labels didn't really help, because gut may not be just what is intuition really? What is gut? People have a gut, and then there's how did they get that gut? By collecting massive amounts of data and making observations over decades. That's a pretty well-informed gut, right? So gut versus tangible works better for me. And I don't know if anybody else was having that struggle, but.
Yeah.
So, along with what Diane's saying, those who are high on the inside generally think about the future possibility, or they use their imagination. Those on the sensing side prefer to think about what's actually going on right now. Anyone else have more on the intuition side, on the N side? Everyone here is sensing?
I was higher on the intuition, but I was similar in the I and E, where my N was 21 and my S was 19. So
You were really close. You're right in there.
Yeah.
Okay. That third dimension is about how we process information in order to make decisions. And we have on the T, that stands for thinking. On the F, we have feeling. So, not surprising, those who score high on the thinking side of the scale prefer to make decisions based on objective criteria. Those who are high on the feeling side prefer to make decisions based on the impact those decisions are going to have on other people. Where are you all on the TF scale? T? F?
Feeling.
Given what you do, I would expect F. T?
Feeling.
Feeling?
This was
T?
my biggest,
You banker, you.
one difference between the two.
Oh, but you're right there in the middle.
No, I'm saying for this one, this was my biggest difference.
Oh,
like
okay.
the most clearly defined
Okay,
feeling.
okay.
But I don't know. And I think also has what Diane is saying, it really resonates with me for this entire thing. It's like one very much informs the other. So it's like having that logical understanding of things, you're able to feel into it. Like, I think they're more connected than they seem, perhaps.
Okay. Caitlin, Beth?
I was on this was a higher for me, like Leah, I was on the feeling side by 29, and the other was 11.
That's significant.
Mhm.
Beth, how about you?
I was on the thinking side and mine was more 29-11, same, but on the thinking
The other
side.
way. Okay. Diane, do you want to share anything there? You're muted?
This is the one where I see the intertwine, as you've mentioned. So I am a gut girl. I start with my feelings. Okay. I start with my gut. And then I say, but what's really happening? And I do that because I know that if I go for my gut, that's when I can make a mistake. Now, if you go purely from thought, you can make big mistakes just as well. So I always have a physical, emotional kind of feeling reaction to things because I love people and everything for me is about their condition and what they're experiencing. I've gotten pretty darn good at stopping myself and moving into the thinking mode, spending a great deal of time in the facts mode, the observations mode. Don't label it, describe it, right? And then before I finalize anything, I go right back through my feelings. And I actually consciously move back and forth between these two things. And that's an acquired capacity over time, because I can remember when I was in my late 20s and I had all the answers, but I didn't know a lot of the questions yet. So this really lets me navigate both the questions and the answers. So I love this one just because it's become such a big part of how I do things.
So those who are higher on the thinking side tend to think about equity and fairness based on objective measures. People who are on the feeling side see fairness in terms of applying different standards in different circumstances. That help? So the fourth dimension is how we take action. And the J is judging, and the P is perceiving. Folks who are high on the judging side of the scale like closure. Check that off my list. Perceiving, people who are high on that side are more comfortable leaving their options open. It's sort of a difference between a work ethic where we can have a good time actually after we get the work done, and the perceiving side, if I can't have a good time doing it, isn't worth doing. Because they like closure, people who score high on the judging side are more focused on product. People who are high on the perceiving side tend to think less about product and more about process. Does that drive anybody? Where I don't want to say that. Where are you all falling on that, in that scale?
I'm an even split.
Boy, that banker really, you got the right career path. Jordan?
J.
Jay,
Oh, yes. Anyone strong, Jay?
29.
Oh, yeah. How about Beth, Caitlin?
I fell more on the J, but I like reading the situations that you said. I don't feel like I should be on the J.
Well, hang on to that thought.
Yeah,
Hang on to that thought.
okay.
Beth?
J as well.
Okay. Yeah, I'm at 31J. I'm very strong on that side. So, let's take a look at, we'll come back to looking at the four letters and where they and what maybe that says about your own style. But first, as part of the scoring, you came up with a 2-letter score that talks about 4 personality styles. SJ, sensing and judging, the SPs of the world, sensing and perceiving, NT, intuition and thinking, and finally NF, intuition and feeling. And the handout that I gave you goes into some a little bit more structure, but let's just talk about anybody in that SJ category. Wow. Jung would call that the traditionalist or the stabilizer. That reflects about 38% of the population. Some words that resonate, or tell me if they resonate with you: steady, responsible, dependable, loyal. Some of the attributes may include they have a sense of duty, they're givers, they feel guilty if dependent, would rather be depended upon. Tanya, I could tell that hit home. They like a sense of belonging. They like a sense of belonging, usefulness, and obligation. Their motto is be prepared. They have a strong work ethic. They often seek careers, and I didn't write this. They often seek careers in business, banking, organizations, education, dentistry. Weaknesses of that traditionalist is they tend to resist change. They are stressed out by crisis and may have only limited vision. Anybody disagree with those? If you raised your hand? Does that ring fairly true?
This is where I had the split, so I got an even split between SJ and SP.
All right,
And
let's.
that feels very relevant, and also like what I see here for SP, I'm like, yep, that's also.
All right, let's talk about the SPs. Who, anyone in fall in that SP category? Okay, so Nali, I'm talking to you. The SPs represent another 38% of the population, and some words that resonate for them: intense, impulsive, risk taker, performer. Their attributes include things like action, winging it. It's process versus product. They live in the moment. They like tools and they like to make things happen. They'll often seek careers in things like performing arts and media, construction, athletics, racing, emergency services. As a weakness, maybe they could get bored with the status quo. They can be unpredictable. They do well in a crisis, so they may actually promote crisis. That's an interesting one. Anyone fall into the NT category?
My S and N were tied, so.
Oh, really? Okay.
So let me take this one, Ray, for a minute.
All right.
So we're kind of putting you on the spot and asking you where you are and what you think about that. But I'm going to flip it now. Take this category Ray's on right now, and let's look at it differently. Think of somebody you know well. Could be somebody you work with, somebody you're married to. What would you say, where do you say they fall? And how does that potentially impact your interactions with them? Ray, can you go back and give the descriptors again? Because the power of this is not just understanding yourself better and helping it to broaden you out. It's also helping you look at other people and say, oh, I see a little NJ there. And I don't know about you, but I had a term for certain people, and I might have loved them. I can describe a particularly massively talented music teacher who was also one of my serial dramatizers. And when I hear this category Ray's on, I hear a little dramatics in there. She's focused on those kids. Those kids are going to be great. Those kids are going to feel great about what they're doing. And let me tell you, they did. But oh man, could this woman create drama around everything she did, right? And so I started to look at her not through the drama, but through the balance of all those categories that made her who she was, right? But just think about other people too. Ray, can you just highlight a few of those
Well, why
descriptors
don't I
again?
go through, let's go through the next two, and then we'll have
Okay.
some background.
Think about yourself and think about people you work with and you're close to, because that's the power of this.
So that NT is called the visionary. It's the architect of change. It represents only about 12% of the population. Some words that resonate for that group are competent, creative, capable. Some of the attributes include they love knowledge and learning. They have a strong focus on self-improvement, ability, and performance. They like to rearrange the environment, imagine systems, structures, connection between ideas. They often see careers in things like engineering, science, mathematics, running organizations. For weaknesses, they tend to be insensitive at times, elitist. They have high expectations of others that makes them demanding. They may seem aloof and detached. Does that sound familiar? That's me all over. That is me all over. And finally, then we have the catalyst, the NFs. That's again 12% of the population. Some words that resonate for them: they're personable, they're democratic, it's integrity. Some of the attributes: they connect with other people, see the good in others. They like to make a difference in the lives of other people. They form strong personal bonds. They often see careers in things like counseling, teaching, nursing, sociology, missionaries. Weaknesses: they can be easily hurt. They're sensitive to criticism. They don't want to hurt others by saying no, so they take on too much. Is that where you fall? Any surprises in there? And let's go back to Diane's question. Think about someone that you know well, no names, but think about what their styles might be and how, now that you have a sense of where you might be, your style might be, how do you work with, if you're the visionary, how are you gonna work with that that negotiator?
And here's another important thing, because you're early in your career development in many respects, especially compared to Ray and I, but don't get yourself fooled to think that you're in one quadrant.
Right.
All right, that vision, what were the last two titles? Visionary and
Visionary and catalyst.
I am an absolute combination of visionary and catalyst. And so you listen to parts of the visionary, and I know that's where I am. You listen to parts of the catalyst, and you know that's where I am. And I do not fit in any one quadrant. And as one of you or several of you have already pointed out, you also may be in a different quadrant depending upon the circumstances, all right, or the culture. So I'm an engineer of environments. If I see a kid who is acting up in a classroom, I'm going to want to understand the environment that that kid is living in, that they're bringing into the classroom. But I'm also going to want to pay attention to how that teacher establishes the classroom, because there are pretty simple ways to adjust the establishment of the classroom to make room for some of the different personalities. And so teachers can use this too. But think about people you know that are particularly, any one of these traits stands out. I'd love to hear you think out loud about it and say, well, you know, I know this one person I work with, and, you know, they're really, really introverted, but when I talk to them one-on-one, they have great ideas, but when we get in the group setting, they just disappear. You know, think about other people and what you see. I'd love to hear you talk about that a little bit.
So I like how it's like, we can look at our numbers too. So it's kind of like a scale of how much you are on either side. So like tying on the N and the S, personally looking at S, J, and NT, it's like, oh yeah, sure, that makes sense for me. But in some of the meetings that I have bi-weekly, I can remind myself it's bi-weekly. I know that there's like a catalyst on my team, and I know that they'll be a little bit more personable and a little bit more democratic. So if I know I'm coming in hot on a topic, I'll say, hey, this is what we need. I'm going to pass it off to so-and-so to discuss their portion of it first. So they kind of set the tone for the meeting. And then I kind of try to come in with supportive pieces, or allow that to kind of be a cooling agent or a calming agent on maybe certain topics.
Yeah.
Where if we need something that is a little bit, there needs to be a little bit more of a fire on it, either I'll take it or have someone else with more of that negotiator piece to say like, hey, this is, you know, and sometimes that's just time within the organization as well. Someone that's been there for 20 years might be able to lay out a game plan a little bit better than I can. But kind of understanding the values that are associated with each one of these letters.
That's huge. That's huge right there.
Right. So I, you know, knowing that, if just look at the letters and see what that value is, and then aligning that person, like you said, aligning that person with that value, knowing the team you're working with, or knowing, you know, the style that they operate well under, and trying to make that happen.
And knowing the task at hand.
Yeah, that's what's coming up for me, like, as you're speaking, is like strategy. It's like, okay, we know that this person's a hammer and this person's a screwdriver. Let's give them a nail and have a screw. Like,
Yeah.
let's divide and conquer this, and plug in where they can really highlight their strength, and it benefits the whole team.
Which is like that delegation we were talking about. Right?
Totally.
Absolutely. And when you need to use the screwdriver to pry something, you might call in the hammer to give it a little extra punch, right? So it's really, this is an amazing tool. I'm going to recommend that you guys revisit this once a year. They sound crazy. Number one, you will feel nuanced change within yourself. Number two, you will revisit it and get it in your brain again and take a new, a freshly dusted off filter into your interactions beyond yourself. And it is a really powerful tool. Another trick, use it when you have to decide who's going to be on what teams. What's the task at hand? You know, if you have a massive data job that's all about structuring and organizing and crunching the data, there are certain people whose styles might not fit that. And you might want to save yourself the hassle by assigning them elsewhere. All right. You may want them to stop in every once in a while and have the data people report their progress so they can say, yeah, but run it through their gut and say, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? So it's a powerful tool. And I discovered something like this, a tool like this, in probably my early 30s. And I went through it myself, and then I started looking at all the teachers. I was a school counselor at the time, and I started looking at all my teachers that I worked with through this lens, and it made me more effective. So things to think about.
Well, in the packet that you received, take a look at the last page. That starts how to get along with ... So, you know, if you're working with the NFs of the world, those catalysts of the world, highlight cooperation, not competition. Be more informal. Let's make sure you're listening to them. Avoid debating on the facts. Focus on personal opinions and relationships. You know, so if you can get a sense, and like Diane said, this is a practiced skill. You know, you get a sense of where folks may lie, and then you can, as you said, put together your teams or in your weekly meetings, or as you're putting together those teams out there in the field. You know who's the screwdriver and who's the hammer. I love that image.
So, any closing thoughts on this exercise and what it could mean before we move on to the next piece, which is Ray dazzling you with lots of information about Delaware County?
Yeah, I think we better take a short break before.
Nope, the break's not till 2:20. I'm gonna hammer.
All right, we're gonna dive in.
While he's getting it ready, any closing thoughts? Okay, I'll be interested to hear. We'll revisit this. We'll ask you now and again. Hey, have you noticed a change in you? Have you noticed you're using this? Have you tried, you know, understanding some of the most difficult people that, by the way, that we tend to use these tools to try to understand the people who cause us the most stress.
And isn't that part of like the analysis of it too, like understanding that where there's struggle points or kind of those opportunities within organizations, sometimes it's probably more of a like the major pieces of communication in all of those fields where they may feel more comfortable communicating certain ways. And that if you're looking at it from a different lens, it's a little bit easier to have some of those conversations.
Well said. Thank you.
So we're gonna start, or I'm gonna start taking a look at demographic information.
Is there a way you make that bigger, or is the way I make it bigger on my screen?
I think I sent you the document.
Yeah, I just made it I just blew it up a smidgen, so it's better
Right.
now.
So I'm gonna just want to give you a very brief overview with some numbers, but then talk about where you can find some of this demographic and economic information. When we're in,
It's okay.
if you decide to start looking for demographic information, just a word of caution, don't get frustrated, because you're gonna think that there's a wealth of information out there and there isn't. Or the information is out there in a format that is not usable for you. And because we're in part because we're in a rural area, no political unit is large enough to upload that to really identify that specific information. So often we're inferring information, and sometimes if you're working on a project and the old adage is numbers, what is that, figures lie and liars figure or something. You can get the numbers to say anything you want them to say, depending upon who you include in those demographic numbers. The one caution that I will offer as we start looking at just some numbers is a lot of these numbers come from the benchmark, US Census. Now let's think about the 2020 census. The idea of the census is that it will make a mark where folks are on April 1st of 2020. If you remember April 1st of 2020, we were 2 weeks into societal meltdown this year. These numbers, not only was, I think, Delaware County undercounted, but in a lot of ways it was miscounted. A lot of the plans that were in place to get everyone counted just didn't happen because of COVID. And we also, not surprising to any of you on this, in this program, we have a huge non-resident homeowner population. The percentage of non-residential properties, no, I shouldn't say that, of residential properties that are owned by non-residents, that's better, increases the further east you go in the county. Across the county, that number right now is probably somewhere around 50%. In townships like Andes, that number is probably upwards, probably more than 70%. And in a place like the township of Middletown, outside of the village settings that always skew those numbers the other way, those numbers are probably somewhere around 40 to 50%. So you keep that in mind as we're looking at this. So according to the US Census, the census is done every 10 years. What the US Census does is every year they'll do the American Community Survey, ACS. And it's not a full census, but they are tracking information, and In 2021, that estimate is a little bit more than 44,000 people here in Delaware County. In 2010, that number was closer to 47, 48,000. We saw a decline in Delaware County of about 8.2% between 2010 and 2020. That number that you see for 21 actually is a very slight increase from 2020. So that works out to be about 30 people per square mile. Number of housing units entirely in the county is a little bit more than 30,000. That number has not changed significantly in the last 15 years. You know, you can't point to any large subdivisions that took place. You can't point to any large housing developments that have taken place. But you see that we have 30,000 housing units, excuse me, in almost 19,000 households. So that remaining 11, 12,000 house properties are the non-resident homeowner population. We have a median household income of a little bit less than 50,000. And again, just for definition, median is not average. Median means the midpoint. So there are that many folks above as below. Per capita, so individual personal income it's just a bit more than $28,000, and we have a poverty rate entirely in the county of almost 13%. As you look at village settings, those numbers are going to be significantly higher. The village of Margaretville has a poverty rate, I think, of about 24%. And you all see that with I forgot what it's called now, but that Lifeline internet service, you know, for $15 or something that everyone loses money on.
Yeah. Not great.
No, exactly. We have a labor force. This was about a year ago of 17.9. That number last month was 18, 18.1, 19.1 was 19,100 was the labor force in September of 2022. And as I mentioned, we have an unemployment rate currently at back in July it was 5.6. 3.1 is the brand spanking new number as of end of last month. We have a median age of 47.9. That's old. Delaware County is among the 5 oldest counties in New York State. And aging quickly. You know, you can see we have a K through 12 student population of a little bit less than 7,000. Home ownership rate of, and that number, by the way, is declining as well. I'll show you some of those a little bit later, and you can see, you know, number of homes sold and the average, the median value of the homes. And let's take a look at the number of businesses. Again, according to the U.S. Census in 2019, there were a little bit more than 1,000 businesses here in Delaware County. Excuse me. I want to bring your attention down to the last number in that column. We have 3 private companies with more than 250 employees in Delaware County. So the great majority of our businesses, no surprise to any of you, are less than certainly less than 5, but even, less than 10 make up a huge percentage of businesses here in the county. So let's take a look at how you find some demographic and economic information online. One of the sources that I recommend, maybe as a place to start, and I'm gonna is the ARC, the Appalachian Regional Commission. Now, I'll talk more, not today, about Appalachia and what that means, because I think understanding Appalachia is absolutely central to understanding the demographics, but more importantly, I think the psychological aspects of living in Delaware County. That map that's up on the screen right now doesn't include all the I had to cut off Mississippi and Alabama, it looks like, but shows those communities, those counties within Appalachia. And if you look at where we are, we fall in that southern tier of New York State. We are almost the far northeast corner edge of Appalachia. Appalachia includes parts of 13 states, and the Appalachian Regional Commission started in the 1960s as a way to elevate the population in these very poor, mostly rural, predominantly rural counties in the United States. So you'll see that it covers a lot of Pennsylvania, covers all of West Virginia, parts of Tennessee, a lot of Kentucky, North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, and Mississippi and Alabama. Couple things
Like,
though.
can I freeze you for just a minute? Likewise, can you go back to that?
Yeah,
I think it's also, and likewise, it's important to see what it doesn't cover. Okay, because you notice it comes into New York, but you're not looking at Orange County and below, you're not looking at Westchester, and you're not even looking north, which I think is worth paying attention to.
when folks often say, what makes our area different than other parts of New York State? When we, if you look at what Diane was just talking about, here we are in Delaware County, includes Otsego, includes Shenango, Schoharie, here's Shenango, here's Broome, and moving along to the
Sullivan's in there.
Sullivan is not in there.
Okay,
Sullivan would fall to our south and east. And while there are certainly parts of Sullivan County that are more alike Delaware, and I think one could make an argument that certainly from say Monticello and west are more indicative of Appalachia than not. Your point, Diane, that Orange County, as an example, and Ulster County, even Greene County, are not included in those in that designation as being in Appalachia. Some of the things that really characterize Appalachia. This is an area that is, as inferred by its name, is mountainous, and the communities are separate and separated, both physically, geographically, but often emotionally. You know, the idea, think about our own, where we are. You know, the folks in Walton don't talk to the people in Delhi. And the folks in Margaretville don't know where Walton is. And no one talks to the people in Sydney. Well, they don't talk to anyone else themselves. So, yeah, that's just a part of the nature. And imagine that continuing for 2,000 miles. It should be of no surprise to anyone that the myth, the legend, I should say, of the Hatfields and McCoys took place in Appalachia. And the idea that old wounds are very fresh, that you know, there are folks that don't talk to other folks because their great grandfather did something to their other uncle, and it's like it happened last week, and you're talking about their mother.
And keep in mind that these generational hurts carry forward. A very good example in Delaware County is I was at the Cauliflower Festival representing the Catskill Discovery Center, Water Discovery Center, and a gentleman came up. He was probably in his mid-70s, and he was still could tear up at describing what his mother went through when they took her home for the reservoir. All right, and these are people of simple pleasures. Ray, could you speak to the education level primarily too as well?
Again, well, here, let's do it this way, because I want to show you where you can get those resources.
Oh, great.
So here we have the fuller maps, and now we have parts of Alabama's first, right? Alabama, then Mississippi. And it's here that you can learn a bit more, but you know, talking about education throughout Appalachia, you can see the difference in the share of population with a bachelor's degree or more. From the period of 2016 through 2020, about 25% of folks in Appalachia, as opposed to 32% of population across the United States. By the way, this 25%, 25.4% within Appalachia actually exceeds the 22% that we have here in Delaware County. So, you know, this is where you can go in and under the research and data tab, just start diving in to lots of different information.
Ray, one of the reasons I like to speak to the education level is the other thing that characterizes Appalachia, if you look at it culturally, is that you got a lot of wicked smart people. They just haven't cultivated that intellect in the same way. They are monstrously able to solve problems and create solutions. And it's very interesting that we measure smart by education level, but it's a very different kind of smart when you look at it, when you start digging into the Appalachian culture.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And that's something to be proud of, by the way.
Yeah.
Okay. And understanding that about the people around you is really important, especially if you particularly have an education, because sometimes they think if you have an education, you're less trustworthy. All right. And the truth is, if you look at them and look for ways to value they're different kind of smart. It can be very powerful tool to engaging them.
So again, here on the ARC website, there's lots of reports, lots of data that you can dive in and kind of get lost with a little bit. The next one that I want to talk about is the US Census. And as I mentioned before, what you will find, here we go. Within the US Census, again, the decennial census, lots of data. Some of it is not all the 2020 data has been uploaded yet into the site. But if you need to do quick facts here for Delaware County, so here we have some population estimates, and you can see in a more of a historical sense, you can look at age and sex, you can look at race and Hispanic origin, population characteristics, living arrangements, computer and internet use. This is something that they've been looking at just in the last less than 10 years. Households with a computer, 87%. Again, this first column is Delaware County. This next column is, just want to see, oh, that's United States in total. Here we go. 87% of households have a computer in Delaware County, and almost 80% have broadband. Congratulations. We're lagging
Let's not talk about cell service.
No, it does not.
And don't tell Glenn, he'll have us building again.
So
Say that again. Why can't we tell Glenn?
Because we'll be building to those 20% in Delaware County that,
Go, Glenn.
that's it.
tell them they're all in Hancock Hill.
Yeah.
Tell them they're all Frontier.
Yeah, yes.
Tell them they're all Frontier.
The triangle between Delaware, Hancock, and that's right.
The other one that I find really interesting that I want to explore a little bit. Oh, it's not, okay. It's the Cornell Program of Applied Demographics. This is one that I use often. Cornell EDU. So what the program on applied demographics does is it pulls lots of data sources into one place. So as an example, if you wanted to look at, let's take a look at, again, take a look at Delaware County. That's not what I want. Let's look at trends. Here we go. And now they have not updated this with 2020 data yet. But you can see here's our total population moving in the wrong direction. You can see this is our 5 to 17. These are the students currently in school in our local schools. And again, that trend it's trending it's trending low. Whereas when we look at 65 and older, it's climbing, and 85 and older is just as well. We can see median age. I said that our median age continues to climb. You can see that there. What are projections in population growth or decline? Now, these numbers, the actual numbers that they have in here are 2020, and they've made projections from that point. So sometime over the next year, these numbers will also be updated. But as you're looking at other things like migrants from different New York counties, looks like these, again, this number is they're sourcing this from the IRS. That looks like 2000, 2011, 12, 13. Some other places that I noted on that sheet. I mentioned Department of Labor. Department of Labor, you can get those numbers. New York State Department of Taxation and Finance, get municipal profiles. And you can see tax rates, but you can also dive into the data. And I mentioned our non-resident homeowners and the impact that they have in our local economy. The only way that you can show that is often through sales tax data. And at Department of Taxation and Finance, you can dive in and see data, sales tax data for the county based on certain industries. So retail sales, and you can dive deeper into that if you want to. We had a period of time, I remember in the late 1990s, where the sales tax collections per capita exceeded the per capita income in Delaware County. So if, again, we just look at those two, you say, well, wait, everyone's spending every bit that they get in, it doesn't make any sense. But that's where that impact comes in. And the last one that I noted, I think it's the last one I noted, is the Southern Tier East Regional Planning Council, or ST8, Southern Tier 8. They're the regional planning folks, so they'll have not as much demographic information as I wish they would have. But that's where all the planners of the 8 counties in the Southern Tier East, which runs from Cuyahoga County, which is on the other side of Broome County and Binghamton, out to Delaware, where at the edge of that includes Schoharie, includes Otsego, includes Shenango. Does not include Sullivan. And that's, those are just other places. The one last one that I did not note in that list. And again, there's not a lot of demographic information, but if you're working on reports or trying to ascertain where things are going economically, the Regional Economic Development Council, New York State divided New York State into, the governor's office divided New York State into 11 economic development regions. We are part of the Southern Tier Council. And again, we're the far east edge of that. But that's again, a place to at least see what, as a region, they're projecting where they project that economy to move forward. Questions? Thank you for hanging in there with me. Diane, I think we're ready for a break.
Well, we are, actually, so we were supposed to break in the middle of that, but you were on a roll. Could you just, when we get back, what we're gonna do is just talk for a minute about that, our designation in the southern tier and what it means, along with a little bit about the watershed. And then get ready, because we're gonna dive into Lencioni's work on teamwork. So how about, my watch says 2:39. So why don't we take a 6 or 7 minute break and then get back to work? Sound good?
Okay.
Yes.
I also just had LASIK eye surgery, so I'm
Oh, no.
wearing some glasses and not crying, just lots of eye drops.
Don't cry.
I hope so.
How did that, what was that like?
There was a complication during the procedure, so that wasn't great. But I am seeing much better. And that's good. And I got a cool t-shirt,
There you go.
new and improved with laser vision.
There you go. You got laser eyes.
Mhm.
But
Ray? You
You
there?
just-
Slipped out.
Okay. All right.
That's great. Love it. You know, that's awesome.
It was good too.
Perfect.
Right? I love that.
Exactly what I'd expect.
Right? It was good. They were cute.
I'm looking at you guys and I'm saying to myself, I wonder how the work you do is affected by this time of year as we go into the winter. And for me, of course, it's always about the holidays and the snow, I hope, falls heavily from the skies. But how, how is the way you spend your time at work or in your community efforts, how is that affected by this time of year? No change, things just trudge along as usual?
I would say community-based is probably some more holiday events. So
Yeah.
it seems to ramp up, right, at the end of the year. So that's work and personal, so I think MPC always has a hand in a little
Yep.
bit of everything, right?
Yep.
So, yeah, it usually gets quicker before it slows down, honestly.
How about the rest of you? Pretty much the same old, same old?
Mine slows down a lot. A lot of my time is like spent recruiting volunteers and getting them like ready and approved to be in matches. So it's like a lot of interviewing, background checks, things like that. But the people who are volunteering are also the people who are less likely to like face the weather when it starts to snow and the roads start to get bad. So a lot of
Yeah.
people will like not engage in the program as they do during the summer months because like the weather is a barrier to them.
Sure. Understood. I asked that because the whole concept of busy is something I feel like especially when I hear you talk about seeking balance, seeking family work balance. I think about as we hit this time of year, and many of you will get busier, but it sounds like it's not too bad. I think of an accountant in March, where it's busy. How you find your balance, right? It's a challenge at times. And I was just curious if you're going to see a lot of that, but it doesn't sound like it's too bad. I get crazy this time of year. I love it.
Me too.
My grandsons did chastise me. I did not have enough Halloween decorations up.
Same.
Yeah.
My nephews
And-
were like, do you even have a costume? Like, I was like, hello, I'm a grown up and I'm like busy working and living my life. I didn't put up fake spider web, sorry.
Yeah, well, I'm retired, so I don't have any excuses. I have to be honest, I was never really that big of a Halloween person. So when I was in school, I was so boring. My standard Halloween was put on a wig, a hat, and cackle a lot and carry a broom. And I was so boring because it was the same show pretty regularly, if I did anything at all. When you're in an elementary school, you kind of have to, but yeah, I was pretty boring. But then, Thanksgiving and Christmas, that's a whole nother story. That's my addiction. Have any of you ever gone to the Ashokan Center? It's down obviously in Shokan. And I was aware of it because when I was down in Orange County working, we sent our students there on retreats. And they got a lot of outdoor education, really kind of cool stuff. And they had a family festival on the weekend of October 16. And I took my 3 grandsons. Oh my goodness. They got to be blacksmiths. You know, they got to bang metal and bend metal and twist it. And 2 of them made heart-shaped trivets, which of course went to their mama. And one of them made a fire poker, but it's gorgeous. It's just gorgeous. And so I have to remember that place is there, you know. It's a good getaway. I don't know where Ray is, but I think we can go ahead and get started if you guys are ready. We have, let's see, oh, we have 2 missings. Okay, 3 missings. Okay, let's wait a minute. Okay, so I'm going to circle back just for a minute, and I know people will wander back in. Ray has given you guys some really, really good tools. I want to talk about how you might use those. So that Cornell Applied Demographics site, the ARC site, and the census site. Those are 3 good examples. If you ever really want to deeply understand where you live, it's a really good place to go to dig in and study. It's pure data. You don't get a great deal of interpretation. But where you might use that kind of thing is if you ever were trying to get an initiative off the ground that involved a grant. So, you know, let's say you have an idea that you'd like to see more economic development. And you know, on one, Delaware County's 2 worlds. On one side of Delaware County, where I am now, it's primarily ag and tourism. But I spent 30 plus years in Sydney, New York, where there's manufacturing, there's some larger businesses, and it's a completely different mindset when it comes to community development and generating revenue and bringing families in, et cetera. It's a different marketing plan, et cetera. So if you were to see, say, I wish that we had more hotels, and you wanted to work with some local people to try to see what it would take to get some help getting a hotel built. Going to data sources like the ones that Ray has provided you would be very, very helpful. And I don't know, and I'm going to ask him this, where you would go to find the data on Airbnbs, but it might be this Southern Tier Regional Economic Development Council. But one of the challenges that we have here in this side of the county, on my side of the county, is that we don't have hotels. And that has really created a great and rich growth in the Airbnb industry, which has also compressed the growth of people purchasing homes to live in year round and raise families in. And some of the homes that got turned into Airbnbs weren't necessarily in the best shape. They were potentially good starter homes for a young family. So there's a lot that goes on this side of the county. And I would say there's a dividing line. So when you look at Margaretville and you look at Roxbury, you look at Andes, even to a degree Delhi, but Delhi has the college, right? And then I always thought Walton was kind of stuck in the middle. They still draw tourism. There are still second homeowners in Walton that don't live here full time. So, but then as soon as you get over the mountain and you get into Sydney, Franklin is a little in both worlds like Walton is. You get over there, and that's where there's a large population base, first of all, and then second of all, their focus is very, very different. Okay, so we have a real challenge going to sources for data if you want to get something done is a really important thing to remember. You may not need it now, but when you ever want to make a case for something, going to places that have pure data can back you up. One example that I will give is the Coalition for Bel Air has expressed frustration with ORDA because they've invested so heavily in the North Country versus the Catskills. Now, there's a lot of reasons for that, but let me tell you an interesting tact they took. They went and looked at the poverty numbers in the counties. And when that punch was landed, it stuck. It's gotten some attention, which sends a message that stop talking about parity right now and talk about economic development, right? Stop talking about skiing and talk about economic development, because in Delaware County, Sullivan County, and Ulster County, the poverty rates are better than 10 points higher than the poverty rates in the North Country. So when you're talking about your frustrations, putting data with it is so powerful. So just stick that in the back of your brain and remember that Ray has shown you these different databases for a reason, and there are others. And he would be a good resource to turn to at a time when you might want to look for certain types of data. Here's where I wanted to point out a challenge with our placement in Southern Tier 8. So we're in this regional economic development group, but a good portion of Delaware County has very little in common with the rest of that economic development zone.
Diane, I would say anything, everything east of the village of Sydney
Yeah.
has little in common.
And it's a real challenge when we're trying to get things done, because when you look at the Binghamton area, that's where the focus is, and it's a struggle. Here's another reason why this is really tough. And I know Ray's ready to talk a little bit about the watershed, and then we're going to move to Lencioni. But where this is also tough is that we're identified as part of the Catskills. And so is Greene, and so is Ulster, and so is Sullivan.
Right?
And we're all in different economic zones. So having any kind of ability to pull together is hampered by the state assignment of counties in these economic development zones, because they never really noticed or recognized or validated the fact that the Catskills have its own drawing power. And in fact, in many respects, Ulster County would better fit in with the Catskills than because of its demographics and its geography. I mean, other than Oneonta, it has no large cities, and Oneonta is clearly not a large city. So this is a challenge. Why do I point this out? We are in a bunch of different worlds all at once. So here's the economic development world where we're here. Here's the school world where we're here. Here's the tourism world where we're here. It's just very, very challenging for us to build the identity that we need to create regional fights. I would suggest that that's something that has to be looked at. And it's something that I'm pushing in some of my roles. I'm pushing to look at that. But even when it comes to medical care, you know, many over here use Bassett. Many use Westchester Medical, which is connected to the Margaretaville Hospital. But clearly, we don't use Binghamton.
No, that's not true.
Well, many.
You know.
So
it-
again, when it comes to healthcare, we're all divided. You see what I mean? So it's a
Well,
very challenging way.
When we're talking about healthcare in the county, you know, it's what started to happen about a decade or about 20 years ago was the idea of the large regional medical
Right.
facilities, and then, you know, the spoke and wheel type of model. And the way that impacted us here in Delaware County, to the negative in some ways, is that those decisions that are affecting us locally are not being made locally to a large
Right.
degree. So as Diane mentioned, Westchester Medical is that Margaretaville Hospital is part now of Westchester Medical. It was probably better when it was Benedictine down in Kingston, but now it's based down in Valhalla. And then Tri-Town Hospital in Sydney, O'Connor Hospital here in Delhi, both part of the Bassett network, Delaware Valley Hospital and their all their outreach clinics. Delaware Valley Hospital is part of United Health Services based in Binghamton. And honestly, the model of those three, Delaware Valley Hospital has they enjoy a lot more autonomy than the other hospitals here in the county. But to what Diane was saying about the regional economic development councils, your point, Diane, is absolutely spot on, and that while the Southern Tier region Economic Development Council is dominated in large part by Binghamton and Corning as those anchors, the types of strategies that you see here on the screen and their priorities are different and than what would normally work for us. And part of the problem, we'll talk about government in our next session, but one of the problems is when you have ineffective local representation. Is that being polite? When we
There's
have
two pieces. There's ineffective, we might see ineffective local representation, and because we have so many feet in so many worlds, it is fragmented. So you have a double whammy in terms of advocacy.
I'll stay on the idea of ineffective, because I think that's really the everyone's fragmented. We have distinctly ineffective representation to groups like the Regional Economic Development Council, where as a large region, they're able to look at a map and say, oh, Delaware County, yeah, that's ag. And it doesn't go anywhere beyond that. It doesn't talk about the technological innovations that are happening at Margaretaville Telephone and Delhi Telephone, and even Hancock Telephone. They talk about tourism as a lifestyle enhancement, as opposed to economic development and real money. So
Yeah.
that's a much longer battle.
We just
And
wanted to introduce that as a key understanding. And then, of course, there's our identity in the watershed. Thank you for that map.
Well, let's talk about this, and will speak about this I'll speak about this more at some other point, but we'll talk briefly right now. I won't get into the history, but as Diane referenced before, that old wounds are still very fresh. What we see here is a map of the west of Hudson watershed for the city of New York. I think you all are aware that Delaware County provides about 60% of the drinking water for the city of New York. And those are based west of Hudson on the five reservoirs. And in Delaware County, we have the Pacton, we have the Cannonsville.
And by the way, the west of Hudson totally is about 90% of the drinking water.
Correct. A little bit more than 50%, like 52 or 54% of Delaware County's landmass falls within the watershed of the city of New York. What that means, and this is something, if you talk to folks who live outside of this area, will have no clue as to what you're talking about. We live with restrictions that quite literally the rest of the world does not have. Restrictions on development, restrictions particularly pertaining to septic systems,
Agriculture.
Agriculture is certainly impacted both positively and negatively. We can dive into this more at some other time, but just a thumbnail history. The first reservoirs were developed more than 100, about 100, almost 130 years ago. And it was in 1910, 1911, that the state legislature essentially gave New York City control over our land. In the 1980s, Congress passed the Federal Clean Drinking Water Act, and what that did was mandate that all municipalities over a certain size either filter their water supply or come up with regulations to the federal EPA's satisfaction that they have enough of regulatory process in place to control and maintain clean water. That was in 1986. In September 1st of 1990, New York City Department of Environmental Protection issued its first set of regulations pertaining to its watershed. Those draconian is not a word I use often or lightly, but that first set of regulations would have depopulated this county, would have ended any future development. So much so that one of the, and at its core, one of the tenets of that first set of regulations said no development within 1,000 feet of a water course. Never defined what water course meant. So think about your properties. In the spring, what happens? We get runoff. We get these little springs that pop up out of the ground that may run for a month, maybe less. That would be considered a water course. If this building were to burn, there could not be a building sited on this property. because it was within 1,000 feet. In our case, of the west of the, actually ours is kind of Little Delaware. That comes behind us. But 1,000 feet of a water course. Main Street, Delhi would have been lost if there was a fire. That final, and I'm happy to say it was my predecessor who initially started banging that drum and brought this to the attention of the general population here in the west of Hudson Basin and elected officials, and that created some lawsuits that created the Coalition of Watershed Towns. That the city created the Watershed Agricultural Council. We'll get into that whole alphabet at some other point. But
Yeah, that's a whole big thing all by itself.
and the Catskill Watershed Corporation was essentially started as a result of the memorandum of agreement, the end of 96, early 97, that was to support us. What's that? Well, you get the filtration avoidance determination and lots of other things that built into that. It's not over. This continues. This continues to be an evolving problem, and I say problem. Now we're talking about things like streamside acquisition of properties. We have the part of the original memorandum of agreement set some conditions, if you will, or process for land acquisition. Certainly it makes sense that if you know, this is your drinking water supply, you want to own land around that reservoir. But that has been extended now to a 90-day flow. So here we are, we're here in Delhi. Here's the town of Meredith to our north, and some of like let's see.
Well, we're Ray, let's
about
not
100
get too
acres
much in the
right
weeds
there.
now.
What's that?
We're in the weeds now.
We are.
Ultimately, the bottom line is New York City had to pony up because there was a rebellion, right, Ray? There was a bit of a rebellion, lawsuits, a good rebellion, and now they have to fund. But one of the things they've done is they bought up way too much land, and now their problem is they cannot demonstrate, and the scientific work has been done, that has done anything to protect their water, and they're facing a new update on the FAD, which is filtration avoidance determination.
Right, and that's true, but again, it goes back to effective leadership, and
Yep.
we can dive.
Yeah,
dive
this is all
but
by itself.
Just know that this is something that affects, as you heard Diane talk about that gentleman who, vividly repeated the stories that his grandmother or mother tells. This is something that's still very fresh in people's minds. And the effectiveness of organizations like the Catskill Watershed Corporation, of the Watershed Agricultural Council, and those others remain, to a lot of us, highly in doubt. And I'll leave it at that.
There's so as Ray mentioned, you're going to get more of the descriptors of what Delaware County is next time, and we're going to be looking at government, and we try to do that in a little bit smaller doses. We know that you could walk away from here with a bunch of questions. Write them down. Write them down, because what we just spend a little time on, and we will spend more time on, is really important. It's really important to where we live. And it's something that the deeper you understand it, the better. So we will provide some tools so that you can really understand more deeply what's happening with the challenges in the watershed. But now we're going to switch over to teams. We've talked about teams so many times. And when I was in school administrator, I made the decision after working at a BOCES that I never wanted to get too lost in educational research, that I wanted to always keep my brain on target with business research as well. And that started years ago, decades ago, in Search of Excellence was a book that came out, and it was about the business world. And I was very interested in that book because it talked about things that I felt schools could look at differently. And so when I was a school administrator, I came upon this guy named Tony Lencioni, and his work was so well written because what he would do is he'd write a story, a fable, he called it a fable, a leadership fable, that contained all of the guts of the challenges each and every one of us face. And then the story would be told and there would be a clear resolution. And then he would take all of his research and take you back 2 pieces of the story. And that's how you got the research. And it's very well done. And at the end of this session, I will send you this particular book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, electronically. You don't have to read it. I need to make that really clear because I don't want you to feel compelled, but you'll have it. And I will tell you that if the time comes where you have a little time, it's light reading. It's a relaxing read when you do the fable section. And then once you've read the story, which isn't that long, once you've read the story, you can start really studying the research through the lens of the story. So I'm going to send it to you, but please don't think it means you've got to pick it up and read it right away. I just don't want you to do that to yourselves. You've got a lot going on. So ultimately, Lencioni studied teams, and we have already spent a fair amount of time on the issue of trust. And one of the things that you need to understand loud and clear is that nothing is going to work as well as it could. It's going to work, but it's going to be inefficient, awkward, clumsy, difficult, without trust. So what I did is, the book is written from the negative, which doesn't suit me in terms of dysfunction. And yet, so I redesigned the pyramid a little bit. So when I put trust down, I also added absence of, because the absence of trust in any organization or in any team is going to get in the way. Can we go down a slide, Ray? There you go. So this is simply the definition of trust, but because I want you to have this as a skill builder, I go to the bottom. So if you are open and vulnerable with team members, you accept and own up to your mistakes and any weaknesses you have, you will help contribute to trust. It's that simple. And I think it's really important. And I think you guys really have this. Each and every one of you and each and every one of us is a package deal. So whatever job is at the table that the team has to get accomplished, you have good things to bring to it. You may also have some weaknesses. Know them. Don't be afraid to express them. So trust is being vulnerable and open with teammates. At the same time, it's the basics of trust that we've talked about. Being trusting. Right? I live in a world where when somebody tells me they're going to do something, or when I see somebody behave in a certain way, I always expect the best. I always assume good intent. It just works. Doesn't mean I'm not paying attention, guys. But to trust others is to open your heart to them. And here we spend a lot of time on data, but opening to your heart to people is one of the most fundamental things of being part of a successful team. So the absence of trust essentially means that people are unwilling to be vulnerable within the group, and team members who are not genuinely open about mistakes and weaknesses make it impossible to have trust. They are not trustworthy. There are other things you can do that make you not trustworthy, like saying, I'm going to hold this in confidence, and then telling 3 people while telling them, please keep this in confidence because I said I would. Not only are you breaking the trust of the person you promised, but you're setting a foundation for the 3 people you tell it to not to believe you when you promise them confidence, because you've made them part of your lie system. Trust is everything. So that's the foundation. And what I wanted you to be able to do is spend a little time. We've already spent a little time on trust, so I don't want to spend too much time there. But spend just a little time thinking about being vulnerable, teams you have worked with, and that person who can't admit they have a weakness or can't admit they didn't live up to their promise. Have you ever run into anybody like that? And this is the hard part. Have you ever been that person? Think about it just for a minute. You don't have to respond if you don't want to, but if you have something to share, feel free. Okay. So earlier, one of you mentioned that what's really, really important to you is to do your work with kindness and to model that. I told you you'd hear that again. I'm going to challenge you to always, always do your work with trust. Another really cool author is the person who wrote the book, The 4 Agreements, which has been taken and put into a graphic that gets a lot of attention on social media, but the book is where the real deal is. And be true to your word. There's nothing more important. And when you do it and you talk about the fact that it's important to you, to others, and you live up to it, you are then modeling it as well. So remember, words and actions. There's an election coming up. I don't vote on words. I vote on actions. So, and if somebody's words and actions don't match, I'm telling you right now, I don't trust them. Make sense? Any reactions? Somebody's got to have a reaction to this. I know you guys.
I just have a question.
Mm-hmm.
How do you develop a good partnership with someone that has over and over shown they're not trustworthy?
Great question. Great question. Ray and I could tell stories, but we're not going to.
My mouth is closed.
And I guess I'm going to say, does anyone else have a thought on that? Because we have already determined you guys are a pretty wise group.
No, I think that's looking at the rest of the triangle there. I recently had in passing conversation with a group within a department that was like, oh, well, that it was something to do with their direct supervisor, and then they were afraid of trust. I could tell because I think we had mentioned this previously, right? Kind of showed it to us real quickly. So it was the breakdown of trust, and then they were afraid of bringing it up and conflicting the
Ding,
environment.
ding, 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 ding.
Then they were like, well, I'm just gonna be here and do what I'm supposed to do and then just get out of here. And they weren't, I was like, oh, well, that's really unfortunate.
Yes,
Great.
you're
have a great day.
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah, but like now what do you do? If I'm aware of that situation and they don't have trust in there, like you're saying, what do you do with that relationship now where you have people that are saying, hey, I don't have that trust? And you're limited in what you can do to affect that change right away, right?
And I want to promise you, we're going to get to this because remember, we have the 3 steps and we're going to practice those a little bit. So let's do this now. Because you just answered that question, which is a huge and important question. And by the way, the next slide is going to talk to you about your question about that person who is a serial untrustworthy human. Ray, can you go to conflict? Thank you. So when you don't have the trust, it's incredibly damaging because it sets a tone for the fear of conflict. Because you ask the question, what do you do? What I know is you have discomfort with that sense of conflict, correct? You know you can't trust the person, but if you bring it up, it takes that conflict into the open. How many of you spend time trying to avoid conflict? Raise your hands if you can think about some times that you have actively sought to avoid conflicts in your team. Avoid. Yeah, let's not go there. Yeah. I need to teach, we need to teach you, and we need to teach one another, and we need to support one another in understanding the power of good conflict. If you are unable to engage in thoughtful, honest discourse around ideas, you can't be successful as a team. And fear of conflict will cause that to stop. So the skill is recognizing conflict is not just inevitable, it's potentially helpful. To embrace conflict effectively, you must first debate ideas rather than people and personalities. That's the power right there. Okay. So,
Diane, this is kind of predicated on the idea that you're coming to this conflict as equals.
yes and no. So that's a great point. I mean, it's a real problem if the boss is the source of the fear. So everybody sits like mummies and waits for the boss to decide and then says, okay, right? Does that happen? So if it is a problem, what I'm focused on right now is a team that is tasked to get something done.
Okay.
If you're working as a member of a team and the task is to get something done, you have to be able to debate ideas for the best way to get it done. And it has to be about the merit of the idea and not the person who shared it. And that's really hard, especially in long-standing teams, correct? Yeah. What do you think about this one? Fear of conflict.
I mean, I would say in the instance that I'm thinking about, it is one of my managers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And we have had learning development plans put into place.
Okay.
And this individual is their own worst enemy. Outstanding thinker, knows products and services, can do anything within an operational standpoint.
Great. So we know the strengths. Yep.
Mhm. But again, is not leading by example, not cross training or career pathing or allowing anybody else to shine besides themselves and constantly lives for gossip and drama. And it's sad, it's very difficult. And we've had many HR-led conversations, and there's no change. And this is 2 years.
It is very frustrating. And it's one of the reasons that Ray and I are going to bring our coaching mechanism in a little bit sooner this year. And we'll talk about that in a few minutes. You have a really tough situation. And one of the tricks, there's many tricks, but one of the tricks is sometimes that boss behaving that way, that manager behaving that way, has an effect of drawing the others together. Have you ever seen a group of people where they have their own subculture and the boss says this and then leaves, or the manager does this and leaves, and they all get together and say, okay, let's get this done. Boom, 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 because they're living up to the goal, which is let's get something accomplished here. Have you ever seen people who do that? Because I have. Anybody else? Has anybody else? I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things that may be a strategy is to get through what you need to get through with the manager and then work in a subculture way with the other people to say, hey guys, come on, let's get this done without smashing the manager, just out of pride for getting it done and building pride in the team for what the team accomplishes. And the manager will probably, once the team does a great job, the manager will probably step forward and take all the credit. I promise you, it blows up eventually. I promise you. No manager can sustain that kind of behavior forever. And if the teams pull together in a reaction to that manager's behavior and do the best work without them, who cares if they look good? It's tough. It's really tough. But conflict is also about communication. Before we do the practice, I want to go through these. So Ray, let's go to the next one. All right, because this is just an intro, really. So the next layer up on the triangle is commitment. And what happens is, if you don't have trust and you don't have the ability to address conflict, people, what's the term that's really hot right now? Quiet quit. They quiet quit the project.
The quitters that stay.
They give all team members the if you don't have healthy conflict, all right, then without having gotten everybody's opinions out there, respected their ideas, no matter who put them on the table. And by the way, I'll never forget, I had this one person who regularly was quite frustrating, and one day put an idea on the table that just nailed it. And I was in my quiet phase because in the early going, I wanted them to do that, the conversing. And I noticed immediately that one of my other cranky people started putting it down. And I said, time out, time out, time out, time out. If I had said that as an idea, would you have reacted that way? Ooh, that was a very long meeting, because it was my opportunity to take it on, because I noticed immediately that because of who delivered it, that person was disrespectful to the idea, which ended up being purely the solution. It was genius. Okay. So it's really hard not to just look at the ideas. But if you haven't had passionate, involvement. Remember the why. Everybody has something they have to contribute. They have a reason for being there, and it's going to cause a problem because once the decision's made, you're going to have marginal commitment at best. And marginal commitment is worse in many respects than no commitment. All right, it's just, it really causes fake agreement and then backstabbing and delays. And from that point forward, the project will limp. That's my best term. Ray
mean
probably has a better one, but
marginal
you've got to have the trust and the ability to have conflict so that you can get true commitment. And by the way, true commitment it's usually achieved best if everybody can see a little bit of their best idea in the final solution. And so if it means you as the leader, or even as a member, have to make sure that you're watching and this particular person isn't getting any of their idea in there, and you see something that could align, pull it in for them, help them. Because then you're going to increase that person's commitment, because when the decision's made, they will see some of their heart in it.
Jake, you had a comment?
You said the like the half-hearted commitment, that's at the individual level, correct, within the group,
Yes,
not the group in total, but just the individual people.
right. When you don't have full engagement,
Yeah.
which means you have to deal with conflict when it arises. And one of the best tricks is to focus on ideas, but let's be realistic, some of it's also interpersonal, right? So yeah. And unfortunately, if you have a team of 6 people working on something and 3 of them are giving you marginal commitment, what do you think that's going to look like in a week and a half when you meet again for an update? What's that going to look like? You left the last meeting and everybody had certain tasks they were going to do to move the project forward. And you come back and you're ready for the update. What do you think that might look like if you have a commitment problem in 3 of your 6 people?
This has been happening with a few of my meetings.
good that we talked about experience and.
And it's difficult because you have a few people who are really excited to progress and do things. And it's so discouraging to have assignments and only 2 people come back with productivity and ideas. And the other people are expecting you to produce it all with their and produce nothing. So it's
And you
really-
get the list of excuses that make you want to strangle them.
Yes.
Oh man, what a week. By the way, you'll know when the meeting, as people enter the meeting, you're going to know who didn't do their job,
Yeah.
who did not meet their commitment because of the way they're talking as they enter the meeting. It's hysterical, man. I am so swamped. I can't believe it. And then on top of that, I mean,
Yeah. So
right?
busy. Everyone's so busy, like we
Oh,
talk.
busy. Oh my God.
Definition of busy, and then you look at, you dare to cross, look across the aisle to the other group and you're like, oh, very busy. I'm not gonna look at that ever again. They're very busy.
Yep.
When they've made.
Guys.
But isn't that part of what we talked about before, personality styles? It's the
Yep.
the emphasis, the satisfaction on a process as opposed to results.
There you go.
Right.
Do you see how all of this comes
Right.
together? It's amazing.
We have folks that have been engaged in community and economic development to one level or another in the region for decades, and it's always been process. Well, that was a great meeting.
You know what my answer to that was?
Well, I know what
That
my
was-
answer is to that, and not one I will use, not a word.
No, I'm all right with that kind of comment to me after a meeting. That was a great meeting. And my response is, and hey, we're going to know just how good it was when we come back next time, if
Mhm.
everybody's got done what needs to get done. That's the measure of a good meeting. Okay. Walking out feeling good is nice. But there may be some people who are going to cause the next meeting. I think I heard the word, and I didn't just hear the word, I heard the feeling, so discouraging. It is. It is very discouraging. So that's why we're going to really work on the kinds of skills you need to power through some of those conflicts, because conflicts are a part of life, and I was raised avoiding them. I'll tell you that right now. When I had a sense of conflict very early in my career, I got so emotional. I hated it. I don't like conflict. I've never liked conflict. Learning that conflict is a part of the human experience, and that rather than like or dislike it, it's to be worked with and understood. It changed my career. Okay. This is one of the biggest things we can help you with, because here's what happens next. You've got that lack of commitment, which now depresses the whole team. Now you have to reshift the work to try to find somebody who's going to get it done. And here's what that does. Now you've got half of your team doing twice the work. So let's go to the next one. That's not right, right? Lack of commitment and buy-in means they can sidestep accountability. All right. And without actually committing to the clear plan of action, even the most focused and driven people will hesitate to call their peers on the actions and behaviors that seem counterproductive to the good of the team. Okay. So I want to go to those 3 steps right here. Somebody is not lived up to their commitment because trust wasn't there, conflict wasn't dealt with, and now they've come in and the work isn't done. Okay. They haven't done their commitment, and it's time. It's time to address the conflict. Keep in mind, these are not in isolation, these layers. They're all weaving in and out and up and down, right? So it's time. So here's what that might sound like. When we left the meeting last time, each of us had a task to do. John, you have just explained to us that you didn't complete your task. And we're all feeling incredibly let down. Do you know how good that would feel for the other members of the team that did their job? That somebody actually says that? That's what a leader does. A leader isn't afraid to say what needs to be said in a respectful way. Because if you honor his lack of commitment, then you are dishonoring commitment. So as this builds, it gets worse. Accountability, if somebody does their job and are accountable to the team, you get where you want to go. So let's quickly go to the next one, and then we're going to do some practice in a different way. In the end, it's all about results, right? If you don't hold each other accountable, you create an environment of inattention to results. So in other words, results happen at every layer. When that guy showed up and had not produced the necessary result, he had to be held accountable, because without that result, you can't get to the end result, which is going to be success. All right. When each is fully accountable to his or her responsibilities to a collective goal, the team can focus on measures of progress. All right. That keeps your desired result front and center. Got it? That's how Lencioni sees this all build after years and years of research. All right. Now, I'm going to send you this whole book. And I want to circle back to something somebody did and said, and this is the teacher in me. You were describing this one manager who is, and all their good qualities, knows the content, knows this, knows that, but then does this and this and this and creates all kinds of discord. I'm going to give you another tool. Take the word but out of your vocabulary and replace it with the word and. All right, let me walk you through it. This guy is amazing. He knows so much about the industry. His skills in terms of creating new products are absolutely immeasurable. But he's a train wreck when it comes to working with people. Here's what happens. What happened to all those good things you said about this person when you said but?
It minimizes them.
What?
It minimizes the
Yes.
importance of them.
They disappeared because the last thing is, and he's a train wreck when it comes to working with people. Okay. But here's what the magic of replacing that with and. He is amazing. He knows the industry. He can create new products better than anybody I ever knew. And at the same time, he struggles sometimes working with other people in an effective way. Now you're respecting the whole package. You want to be respected as a package deal. It's easier. Let's go back to trust. You got to be vulnerable. It's easier to be vulnerable about your weaknesses if you are modeling for people to recognize that everybody's a package deal. We all have our strengths and weaknesses. So a little trick as you are describing people you're working with or challenges you face, when you talk about the good and you're about to highlight some areas for growth, take but out and put and in. Here's a really funny story, and it's important when I think it'll help you understand. I had a teacher who was particularly great with kids, really, really loved those kids, special ed teacher. And I really wanted to see her expand her leadership. At the same time, she was also very kind of connected to this one administrator who was a little bit on the manipulative and negative side. So there was this training that was made available, and we asked her to go because we thought she would be a huge asset in the middle school. And she dragged her heels. And so I sat her down. I said, look, I'm asking this of you because I see something amazing in you. And I think if you get this training, you'll be able to operationalize it in a way that helps other people see how powerful it is. And if I'm wrong, tell me. All I'm going to ask you to do is walk away with one thing. You can go for a week's training. We were paying her, by the way, to go. You can go to a week's training. I don't care if you don't do anything but one thing. Just walk away with one thing. So she did. And she did it with a good heart. And we both showed a little bit of vulnerability to each other, which changed our relationship, I'll be honest. Because I said to her, I'm struggling because we need to make a change, but I need people on the inside to be doing it. So she came back and she started working with kids the next year, and she replaced but with and. And she was very conscious about the day she was going to do it. So it's the beginning of October. I'm sitting there working on some stuff in my office at 10 to 3, and she flies in my office, doesn't even stop. See, my secretary just flies at you. You won't believe it. And I said, I'll believe anything coming from you. And she said, I did it. I took out but, and I said, and I said, well, tell me what happened. So she started talking to the kids about what they had done right on an assignment. And instead of saying, but, she said, and the next thing you need to work on is this and this and this. Within 20 minutes, these special ed kids were saying to her, hey, what did you do with the butt? That's how powerful a little word like that is. And she could not believe the transformation in these kids, their confidence, their academic growth, because here's what would happen. Oh, this is great. This is great. This is great. Yes. But
Right.
deflation, pure deflation. So there's a trick for you. All right. Now, how we doing, Ray? Can-
We're running a little short, so I think.
Okay, well, I need you to put up the conflict scenarios, please.
I will pass those out.
I need them. Oh, okay. You don't have them for the screen?
I don't know.
Okay, all right. No, you don't. Okay. No, we didn't do that. We didn't do that before. That's fine.
No.
All right, so pass them out. That's fine. We can make that work,
And Beth and Caitlin, you have those as well.
So the conflict scenarios are 3 stories, and I don't know how far we're gonna get. I'm gonna open them here. I think I have them. Yes, okay, good. I got them. I'm not gonna see your beautiful faces, but. All right, so conflict scenario 1. I wanna really spend some time because conflict is so essential to the building of trust and the work that gets results. All right, so let's go, let me see which one I want to do first. Okay. I'm going to go with conflict scenario number 2. I want to practice the 3 steps. So a conflict occurs and you want to speak to somebody about your feelings on that conflict. Step 1, when you. Specifically, what did that person do? Step 2, I feel. How did their behavior impact you? Third step, could we? Or how about? The third step is in the future. Okay, and I'm going to call on you guys to practice these steps right now. So please be ready. Here's the scenario. You and a colleague were responsible to research and develop a report on which you did a tremendous amount of work. Your colleague was tasked to submit the report electronically and did not get it in on time. Your shared supervisor, so the supervisor supervises you both, has called you both on the carpet for the delay. And your colleague has come into the office angry, blaming you because they got in trouble with the boss. Who's willing to try practicing the 3 steps on this scenario? They're in your face. They've come into your office. They're mad at you because their boss just yelled at them. Come on, somebody be brave.
I'll go.
Thank you. All right, we gotta give her support here.
Okay, I'm feeling it, feeling the support.
All right, go.
Okay. So when you blame me for getting in trouble, I feel confused. Could we revisit the task and the way it played out?
Okay. What do you think, guys? Did that feel natural at all?
No,
Nope.
no, not really.
Nope. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And yet, anybody else want to take a try at it? By the way, yay. All right. You're saying, let's go. Let's look at the task. You're going to help them dive into recognize that they did this to themselves. Anybody else have a,
Just really quick, have a question.
Yeah.
Would you say that it's helpful or maybe not helpful to like recognize and let them know that you see where they're coming, not where they're coming from, but that you acknowledge where they're at? Like,
Sure.
I see that you're really upset with
absolutely,
this.
sure, you could do that. How
Okay.
would that sound?
Yeah, that would be more like, I see that you're really upset about this. I'm upset too. And I feel like that kind of establishes some common ground, and be like, let's talk about this, but, yeah, I think that's an important step because I want to be heard too.
All right, so let me play with how that's going to sound with an experienced three-stepper. I'm an experienced three-stepper. When you express your anger at me, I'm a little frustrated because frankly, neither of us like getting yelled at, right? It doesn't feel good. So that's another way you could do it. I strongly recommend you start practicing putting it on them first. So when you come in upset with me because you got yelled at, hey, I'm in the same boat, right? We both got yelled at. Nope, I didn't like it either. All right, so that's another way to do it. And then you would move forward with, I also feel confused. And you might even want to get specific here, because when I looked at the task sheet, it looks like you were supposed to submit it. What happened? See, what happened leaves them a little bit of room for grace. So you're holding him accountable, but you're not kicking him in the face. All right. This is an art form. It really is. But yes, I do think there's room in this for showing compassion. What happened? Are you okay? I mean, I'll be honest, I sent an email to somebody who's accountable to me recently, and 9 days later, when I hadn't heard back, instead of beating it up again, I simply said, hey, you always get back to me within 24 hours. It's been 9 days. Are you okay? That was my first question. And by the way, he took that as a good opportunity to delay it even further by telling me how overwhelmed he was. So yesterday he got the emails again. But yes, you can do this with compassion. Who else has a reaction to this?
I just jotted one down talking about being compassionate, and I put, I really appreciate your partnership with this task. When you are falling behind, please feel free to notify or ask me for additional support. Yes.
What do you guys think about that? Let me ask you this. Who has taken responsibility for the solution?
You.
Yeah.
Is that accountability?
No.
I'm not saying you don't offer that. I'm saying you don't offer it first.
Or even like feel free to reach out to me feels like you need to let me know, like we're equal partners on this. You need to let me know if you're not able to
There you
submit
go.
whatever.
I really recommend you always start by making sure it's very clear that where they made you uncomfortable. All right. It might even sound like this. Hey, when you come yelling at me because you got called out, I got called out too. And I'm frustrated because I did my role and you didn't do yours. Then if you want to give them a little space, fine. If you want to say, are you okay? Is everything okay? They might unload a lot on you, in which case then you can say, all right, step 3 in the future. When we commit to tasks, if anything is going to get in the way, let me know. I'll help you. We're both in this, right? This is very complicated, and it's why I tell everybody it's a superpower when you get good at it, but never start on high stakes issues. never. And by the way, this is really, you guys are coming up with very nuanced questions about this process. But if you are not careful, you're going to own all the solutions. And that's not accountability. And it's not honestly addressing the conflict, which is, damn it, you had one job to do, right? And I say that with a laugh, but you have to go to the conflict and accountability, but you can still do it with respect and care. But you have to be honest. You're angry at me for getting yelled at. I got yelled at too. And I'm feeling pretty angry with you right now. It can sound a lot of different ways. The key is getting it out there in steps 1 and 2, and then 3 is your building step. 3 is your building step. Okay. Now, we're right at the end of our time because we really kind of went a little long on some other pieces. This is really, really important. So, couple things. And then, first of all, I would really like to see you guys try this on very low risk situations. When I feel, could we? Low risk situations. I really want you to commit to trying it. I hope you can see the value of the process, this 3-step process. But yes, in complex situations, it's very complex and we recognize it. So just try it in some little, or even if you don't try it, you just play it in your head. By the way, when I first started using this, I went home at night and I thought, oh, that made me so mad. And I didn't say what I was feeling. I practiced it at home. I practiced it on myself to begin with because it was foreign. But it's a really good tool when you're trying to build successful teamwork in an organization. So I'm going to ask you each to commit to playing with it in your head after a conflict situation, trying it on a low risk situation. And I'm going to ask you, please don't try it on any high risk situations, unless it's just practicing it in your head and you're going to come back and we'll talk about it. Okay. All right. All right. So the power of conflict, a couple quick things. One of the reasons we did the magic wand is that we're going to encourage you guys to create a project, something you want to create or initiate during the course of this time we're together. And I think it's going to be particularly challenging for you guys because I don't think Ray or I have heard any specific, detailed, tangible things that you want to get accomplished. So it may be nuanced work, and that's okay. But we do need to have you start thinking about as you go through the course of this, what's something you'd like to see achieved? It might be within you, it might be within your team, it might be in your community service group, it might be in your job. I don't know. But start pondering. Pondering is one of my favorite words these days. Okay. The second thing I'm tasked to do as we finish up is look at coaching, individual coaching, and I'll give my perspective and turn it over to Ray. We started doing some individual one-on-one coaching last group, and we thought it was potentially really valuable for you. And what it would mean is, as we get back together next time, and we have a sense of some things you're thinking about for a project, something you'd like to be, and by the way, if you don't have anything, that's okay. We can try to, maybe we'll come up with some small group projects. We're totally flexible. But if when we come back together, seeing what you're thinking will help Ray and I decide, where we want to try to have the coaching assignments made. And we'd like to get that started a little earlier than usual because you guys are kind of a unique group. So those were the things that we had next. And Ray.
That's it. Next
All
time
right.
we're gonna talk government. We have, we'll have a panel through Zoom. We'll have a state senator, we'll have a town board member, we'll have, I'm hoping, a town supervisor and hopefully a mayor. And very diverse group. Hand selected, of course. So, as I said, we'll talk government a little bit. We'll dive into that, but get some of their perspectives on leadership within community, particularly as it pertains to government. And we'll probably start with we'll certainly spend some time talking about projects. So give some thought to that. And what, our experience has been as folks, as you talk about those projects, someone's gonna say, well, have you thought about this or thought about that? And this becomes a group effort to mold that project moving forward. So we'll meet again November 8th, Election Day. Go vote before you come. I'll see you in a couple weeks. Thanks for coming today.
You guys are awesome. Keep up the good work.
I'll have a Zoom link as well, but if you all can find that you can make it, that would be great. So I can throw the four elected folks up on the screen.
And if any of you have questions or things that pop in your brain in between the 2 weeks that are important to you, email either of us or both of us, please. We're here.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're awesome.
Y'all. Tanya, thanks for coming to breakfast last Friday. I hope your team found it useful.
Yeah, we actually, Mary, was that her name?